The morning sun shone through the glass doors of Heartland Financial as James Wilson pushed them open. He'd just finished his morning workout, still dressed in his navy running pants and a plain black t-shirt with his gym bag slung over his shoulder. His watch, a simple but expensive timepiece, was the only hint of his actual net worth. At 42, James had built Rise Tech Solutions from nothing into a company now valued at over $500 million. Today, however, he wasn't thinking about his company's success. He needed to discuss financing options for a new office building. And since he was already downtown for his gym session, stopping by his bank made perfect sense. The bank lobby was quiet for a Thursday morning. Two tellers chatted behind the counter while a lone security guard nodded at James as he entered. The polished marble floor reflected the overhead lights as James approached the receptionist's desk. "Good morning," James said with a smile. "I'd like to speak with someone about a business loan. I'm hoping to catch Robert Hayes if he's available." The receptionist, a young woman with carefully styled hair, glanced up from her computer. Her eyes moved quickly over James's casual clothes, lingering briefly on his gym bag. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of dismissal. "No, I don't," James replied. "I was in the area and thought I'd see if Robert had a few minutes." "I've worked with him before." The receptionist pursed her lips. "Mr. Hayes only sees clients by appointment, especially for loan consultations." She pointed toward the ATM near the entrance. "The machines can handle most basic transactions if you need to make a deposit or withdrawal." James took a deep breath. "I understand he's busy, but I'm not here for basic transactions. I'm James Wilson, CEO of Rise Tech Solutions. We've been banking with Heartland for 8 years now. I just need 15 minutes of his time to discuss a commercial real estate loan." Something flickered across the receptionist's face. Doubt, perhaps, or confusion. "Mr. Wilson," she repeated slowly, as if testing whether the name should mean something to her. "Let me check if anyone is available to assist you." She picked up the phone and dialed an extension, turning slightly away from James as she spoke in a hushed tone. James couldn't hear the entire conversation, but he caught phrases like "walk in" and "says he's a CEO." The bank manager appeared a few minutes later. Thomas Blackwell was a thin man with graying hair and a permanent frown that had deepened over the years James had known him. They'd met several times at charity events, though James noted that Blackwell showed no signs of recognition today. "Good morning, sir," Blackwell said, his tone professional but cool. "I understand you're looking for loan information." "Thomas," James said, extending his hand. "Good to see you again." "Yes, I was hoping to catch Robert to discuss financing options for a new office complex we're looking at. Rise Tech has outgrown our current space." Blackwell's handshake was brief and limp. His eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm afraid Mr. Hayes is with clients all morning. Our loan officers work by appointment only, especially for complex discussions." "I understand," James said, keeping his tone even despite his growing frustration. "But given our history with the bank, I thought someone might have a few minutes. Our company keeps over $20 million in accounts here." The manager's expression didn't change. "Perhaps you could make an appointment for next week? Or if you'd like to leave your information, someone could call you back." James reached for his wallet and pulled out his business card, handing it to Blackwell. "Here's my information. I'm surprised you don't remember me from the Chamber of Commerce events. We've spoken several times." Blackwell glanced at the card, his eyebrows lifting slightly before his face returned to its neutral mask. "Of course, Mr. Wilson. My apologies for not recognizing you immediately. However, our policy on appointments remains the same for everyone." An older woman approached the manager and whispered something in his ear. Blackwell nodded and turned back to James. "If you'll excuse me, I have an appointment waiting. Lisa at the front desk can help you schedule something for next week." James stood there, card still in hand, as Blackwell walked away. Through the glass walls of a nearby conference room, he could see the manager warmly greeting an older white couple, smiling broadly as he shook the man's hand with evident enthusiasm. James walked back to the receptionist, Lisa, who was now typing rapidly on her keyboard. "I'd like to make an appointment with Robert Hayes," James said. Lisa clicked through several screens. "The earliest he can see you would be next Wednesday at 2 p.m. "That's nearly a week away," James said. "I'm trying to move quickly on this property. Is there anyone else available sooner?" "I'm afraid not for the type of loan you're describing," she replied without looking up. Commercial real estate financing requires our senior loan officers, and they're all booked solid. James pulled out his phone and checked his calendar. Wednesday doesn't work for me. I have an investor meeting that afternoon. Thursday morning at 9 a.m.? I'll take it, James said, suppressing a sigh. Lisa entered the information and handed James a small appointment card. Please bring your business financial statements, tax returns for the past 3 years, and a detailed proposal for the property you're interested in purchasing. I've been a client here for 8 years, James said. You already have all my company's financial information on file. It's policy to review updated documents for all loan applications, she said with finality. Is there anything else I can help you with today? James looked around the bank one more time. Through another glass partition, he noticed a white man in jeans and a polo shirt being escorted directly to an office by another bank employee. No appointment card. No waiting until next week. No, James said finally. I think I've seen everything I need to see today. Outside, the warm morning had turned hotter, matching James's mood. He loosened his shoulders and took a few deep breaths of the humid air. As he waited for the crosswalk signal, he replayed the interaction in his mind. 8 years of banking with Heartland. $20 million in accounts. Countless meetings with the very people who had just treated him like a stranger. The signal changed, but James didn't move. Other pedestrians flowed around him as an idea began to form. He pulled out his phone again, but instead of checking his calendar, he opened his investment app. Then he called his chief financial officer. Hey, David, he said when his CFO answered. Remember how we were talking about diversifying our investments? I think I just found our next opportunity. What do you know about Heartland Financial's stock performance over the past year? James smiled as he listened to his CFO's response. The bank might not have had 15 minutes for him today, but soon, they would have all the time in the world. Because James Wilson didn't get mad when faced with disrespect and discrimination. He got strategic. As he finally crossed the street toward his parked car, James made a mental note to cancel his Thursday appointment. He wouldn't be applying for a loan from Heartland Financial after all. He would be buying it instead. 2 days after the incident at Heartland Financial, James sat in his corner office staring at his computer screen. His fingers tapped rhythmically on the polished surface of his desk as he scrolled through the bank's public financial reports. What had begun as simple curiosity was quickly transforming into something more focused, something with potential. You wanted to see me? David Chen, RiseTech's chief financial officer, stood in the doorway, a tablet tucked under his arm. James waved him in. Close the door. I want to show you something. David settled into one of the chairs across from James, who turned his monitor so they could both see it. Heartland Financial. Take a look at their quarterly earnings, James said, pointing to a graph showing a steady downward trend. David leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied the numbers. They've been losing ground for the past 6 quarters. Not dramatically, but consistently. Exactly, James nodded. And their stock has dropped nearly 18% since last year. What sparked your interest in Heartland? We've banked with them for years, but you've never mentioned them as an investment target before. James leaned back in his chair, weighing how much to share. Let's just say I had an eye-opening experience there this week. Got me thinking about their overall business model and whether they're keeping up with the times. David raised an eyebrow but didn't press for details. He was used to James's occasional cryptic responses when an idea was still forming. What I really need, James continued, is deeper information. Their customer satisfaction ratings, technology adoption metrics, branch performance data. Anything that might explain why they're struggling when other regional banks are thriving. I can put together a team to dig into this, David said. But I have to ask, are we looking at this as a potential investment opportunity, or is there something else going on? James's lips curved into a small smile. Let's call it a research project for now. One that requires absolute discretion. Over the next 2 weeks, James assembled a small, trusted team to investigate Heartland Financial from every angle. They analyzed public records, industry reports, and social media mentions. They visited different branches as regular customers to evaluate service quality. They spoke with former employees who had left the bank in recent years. A picture began to emerge. Their technology is at least 5 years behind. Industry standards, explained Lily Wong, RiseTech's head of technical research during a closed-door meeting. She flipped through slides showing outdated ATMs and a clunky mobile banking app with poor reviews. Their online banking platform crashed 3 times in the past year alone. What about their customer base? James asked. David took over, bringing up a new set of charts. Aging and shrinking. They're losing younger clients to online banks and failing to attract new business accounts. Small business loans, once their specialty, are down 40% compared to 5 years ago. And here's something interesting, added Antonio Garcia, who headed RiseTech's legal department. He handed out printed copies of several complaints filed with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. There's a pattern of similar experiences to what you described, particularly from minority business owners. Nothing that's led to major legal action yet, but definitely a trend. James flipped through the complaints, his jaw tightening as he read accounts that mirrored his own experience. People with perfect credit histories and successful businesses being denied services or treated dismissively, with a disproportionate number of these complaints coming from Black and Hispanic business owners. It's not just poor customer service, James said quietly. It's systemic, and it's costing them. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline as his mind worked through the implications. Heartland wasn't just failing to keep up with technology. They were failing to recognize the changing face of business success in their own community. Their leadership hasn't changed in nearly a decade, David pointed out. Same board members, same executive team. The banking world has evolved around them and they've stayed put. That explains a lot, James murmured, turning back to the room. So we have an institution that's technologically behind, losing market share, alienating valuable potential clients, and led by people who can't or won't see the changing landscape. Exactly, Lily confirmed. And their stock price reflects it. They're undervalued even considering all these issues. Antonio leaned forward. James, are you thinking what I think you're thinking? Because if you are, I should point out that acquiring a bank comes with serious regulatory hurdles. James nodded. I'm aware, but I'm not talking about RiseTech acquiring Heartland. This would be a personal venture, separate from our company. The room fell silent as the team processed this statement. You're actually considering buying the bank that disrespected you? David asked, unable to hide his surprise. I'm considering buying a struggling financial institution with solid fundamentals and terrible leadership, James corrected. The fact that they didn't recognize me as a potential client worth their time just highlighted an opportunity I might have otherwise missed. He pulled up another document on his computer, a detailed analysis of Heartland's market position and asset valuation. Look at their real estate holdings alone. Prime locations throughout the city, buildings they've owned outright for decades. Their loan portfolio, despite recent declines, is still solid, and their brand recognition in the region is strong, even if their reputation is suffering. Antonio whistled low. So you'd be buying the infrastructure and the brand, not the current business model. Exactly, James said. Banks don't fail because banking itself becomes obsolete. They fail because they don't adapt to how people want to bank today. The team spent the next hour discussing the potential of a transformed Heartland Financial, one with modern technology, inclusive practices, and innovative services designed for today's diverse business community. As the meeting wound down, Lily asked the question everyone was thinking. So what's next? Are you really going to try to buy a bank? James smiled. First, I need to understand exactly what I'd be getting into. David, I want a complete financial risk assessment. Antonio, put together everything I need to know about banking regulations and requirements for ownership. Lily, I need a detailed report on what it would take to modernize their systems. He paused, looking at each of them. And all of this stays in this room. Not a word to anyone, inside or outside the company. As the team filed out, David hung back. You know, he said once they were alone, there's a certain poetry to this. They wouldn't give you the time of day as a customer, so you're going to become their boss. James shook his head. This isn't about revenge, David. It's about recognizing a business opportunity they missed because they couldn't see past their own biases. Their loss will be my gain, and eventually, the community's gain too. Later that evening, after everyone else had left for the day, James sat alone in his office reviewing everything his team had discovered. He pulled up Heartland's website, studying the faces of the board members and executive team, all older, all white, all from similar backgrounds. He then opened a folder on his computer and clicked through photographs taken at various charity events over the years. Photos that showed him standing right next to Heartland's board chairman and bank president, sometimes engaged in conversation with them, the same people who, through their employees, had treated him like a stranger. James wasn't angry anymore. That hot flash of indignation he'd felt standing in the bank lobby had cooled into something more powerful. Determination. Not just to prove a point, but to create something better. He opened his personal financial portfolio and began calculating how much of his own wealth he could reasonably invest in this venture. Then he made a list of potential partners, other successful business owners who might share his vision for a more inclusive, technologically advanced banking institution. By midnight, he had the outlines of a plan. By the end of the month, he would take the first concrete steps toward acquiring Heartland Financial. Not because they had disrespected him, but because they had shown him an opportunity hidden in plain sight. Sometimes, James thought as he finally shut down his computer and prepared to head home, the best response to being underestimated was to aim higher than anyone expected, and he was aiming very high indeed. A light rain tapped against the windows of the private dining room at the summit, an exclusive restaurant perched on the top floor of the city's tallest building. James straightened his tie as he watched 4 people enter the room. These weren't just any 4 people. They represented billions in investment capital and decades of financial expertise. "Thank you all for coming," James said, shaking hands with each guest as they settled around the table. "I appreciate your willingness to hear me out, especially on such short notice." Richard Taylor, founder of a successful venture capital firm, spoke first. "When you call with a unique opportunity, we listen. Though I must admit your secrecy has us all curious." James smiled. "For good reason. What I'm about to share requires absolute confidentiality." He pressed a button on a remote, and the screens around the room came to life, displaying the Heartland Financial logo. "A bank?" Patricia Washington raised an eyebrow. She had built her wealth in real estate development and was known for her sharp instincts. "That's your big opportunity?" "Not just any bank," James replied. "A regional institution with 27 branches, $2.8 billion in assets, and a stock price that's been steadily declining despite solid fundamentals." He spent the next 30 minutes outlining everything his team had discovered about Heartland Financial, their outdated technology, their failure to adapt to changing markets, their declining customer base, and the pattern of complaints from minority business owners. "Their problems are entirely self-inflicted," James concluded. "Poor leadership, resistance to change, and an inability to recognize the diverse face of today's business community. But their underlying assets are strong." Michael Chen, who had made his fortune in tech startups before becoming an angel investor, leaned forward. "So you want to buy a struggling bank and modernize it? Ambitious, but what makes you think you can succeed where their current leadership has failed?" "Because I understand what they're missing," James said simply. "I see the opportunities they're blind to, and I have a clear vision for transformation." He clicked to the next slide, showing projections for a revitalized Heartland. "Imagine a bank that combines the stability and trust of a traditional institution with cutting-edge digital services. One that specifically caters to the needs of small businesses and entrepreneurs from all backgrounds. One that uses technology to make banking more accessible while maintaining the personal relationships that regional banks are known for." The 4th guest, Elena Rodriguez, had been quietly taking notes. As the former president of a national bank who now sat on multiple corporate boards, her opinion carried significant weight. "Banking regulations are complex," she said. "Have you considered the regulatory hurdles?" "The Fed doesn't just let anyone buy a bank," James nodded. "I've had my legal team working on that for weeks. We've mapped out every step of the regulatory approval process." He handed out folders containing detailed plans addressing each regulatory requirement. "This is surprisingly thorough," Elena said as she flipped through the pages. "I don't do anything halfway," James replied. "Especially something of this magnitude." "What about capital?" Richard asked. "Even with its declining stock price, we're talking about a significant investment." "I've secured commitments for 60% of what we'll need," James said. "That's why you're here. I'm looking for or partners who share my vision and who want to be part of something transformative." The conversation shifted to numbers, with James outlining the financial structure of his proposed acquisition. He was prepared to invest a substantial portion of his personal wealth in the venture, demonstrating his commitment and confidence. "You haven't mentioned why you're targeting Heartland specifically," Patricia noted as the discussion wound down. "There are other regional banks in similar situations. Why this one?" James hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach with potential partners. "I've been a customer there for 8 years," he said. "Recently, I went in to discuss a commercial loan and was treated like I didn't belong, despite having millions in accounts with them. The manager didn't recognize me or pretended not to. The loan officer was suddenly unavailable. I was told to make an appointment a week later and bring documentation they already had on file." Understanding dawned on their faces. "So this is personal," Michael said. "It started that way," James admitted. But what began as frustration quickly evolved into seeing a genuine opportunity. Their treatment of me was a symptom of a larger problem, one that's costing them customers and growth potential. Fixing that problem means opportunity for us. Elena tapped her pen against the table thoughtfully. A bank that fails to recognize one of the most successful CEOs in the city as a valuable client has deeper issues than just poor customer service. "Exactly," James agreed. "And those issues are reflected in their bottom line." After the meeting concluded and commitments were secured, James returned to his office to meet with his core team. They had been working tirelessly on the acquisition plan for weeks. "How did it go?" David asked as James walked in. "All 4 are in," James replied, unable to contain his smile. "We've got the capital we need." The team erupted in cheers and high fives. "Now comes the hard part," Antonio cautioned once the celebration subsided. "We need to start acquiring shares without driving up the price. And we need to prepare for resistance from the current board once they realize what's happening." James nodded. "Which is why we're going to move carefully. We'll use multiple investment vehicles to gradually build our position, no single purchase large enough to trigger reporting requirements or alert the market." Over the next 3 months, James and his partners methodically executed their plan. They created several investment entities that slowly accumulated Heartland Financial stock. They recruited banking industry experts who could step into leadership roles post-acquisition. They refined their transformation strategy, from technology upgrades to new service offerings designed to attract younger customers and minority-owned businesses. Throughout this period, James maintained his accounts at Heartland, occasionally visiting different branches to observe their operations firsthand. None of the employees recognized him as the CEO who had been denied service, nor did they suspect he was quietly becoming one of the bank's largest shareholders. "We just crossed the 15% threshold," David reported during one of their weekly strategy sessions. "We're now the single largest shareholder block." "Any reaction from the board?" James asked. "Nothing direct," Antonio replied. "But there's been some unusual activity. Several board members have increased their own holdings slightly. They might suspect something's happening, but they don't know who's behind it." "What about regulatory approval?" James turned to Elena, who had taken a more active role as they approached the critical phase of their plan. "We've laid all the groundwork," she confirmed. "Our filing is ready to submit as soon as we make our move." James leaned back in his chair, weighing their position. They had accumulated enough shares to have significant influence, but not enough to force a takeover. The next step would require direct engagement with Heartland's board. "It's time," he decided. "Let's request a meeting." The letter that went to Heartland's chairman was carefully crafted. It came not from James personally, but from Horizon Partners, the investment group they had created for this purpose. It noted Horizon's substantial stake in the bank and requested a meeting to discuss strategic opportunities to enhance shareholder value. The response came quickly. Heartland's chairman, William Bradford, agreed to meet with representatives from Horizon Partners the following week. "They don't know it's you yet?" Lily asked when James showed her the response. "No," James replied, "and we're going to keep it that way until the right moment." The night before the scheduled meeting, James couldn't sleep. He stood at his apartment window looking out at the city lights, thinking about how far he had come. From a kid who grew up in a working-class neighborhood to the CEO of a major tech company, from someone who was denied basic respect at his own bank to someone on the verge of buying that very institution. But it wasn't pride that kept him awake. It was responsibility. If this plan succeeded, hundreds of employees would be looking to him for leadership. Thousands of customers would be trusting him with their money and financial futures. This wasn't just about proving a point or seizing an opportunity. It was about creating something better. As dawn broke over the city, James made a promise to himself. If he succeeded in acquiring Heartland Financial, he wouldn't just fix what was broken. He would build something truly exceptional. A banking institution that combined the best of traditional service with innovative technology, and that truly saw the potential in every customer who walked through its doors, regardless of what they were wearing or what they looked like. The conference room on the 32nd floor of Heartland Financial's headquarters buzzed with tension. On one side of the polished mahogany table sat 5 members of the bank's board, including Chairman William Bradford and CEO Howard Phillips. On the other side sat the representatives from Horizon Partners, James and 3 of his closest advisors. Bradford, a man in his mid-60s with silver hair and a tailored suit that spoke of old money, cleared his throat. "Well, Mr. Wilson, this is certainly unexpected. When we agreed to meet with Horizon Partners, we had no idea you were behind it." James maintained a neutral expression. "I appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today. As my letter indicated, we've acquired a significant position in Heartland and believe we can help unlock substantial value for all shareholders." Phillips, the CEO, leaned forward with narrowed eyes. "Forgive my directness, but what qualifies a technology executive to advise a banking institution? These are very different industries." "Banking and technology are increasingly inseparable," James replied calmly, "and Horizon Partners includes several individuals with extensive banking experience, including Elena Rodriguez, who served as president of National Commerce Bank for 12 years. Elena, sitting beside James, nodded politely to the board members. "Still," Bradford persisted, "your sudden interest in our bank is puzzling, especially given the size of your investment." "May I ask what prompted it?" James had anticipated this question. "We see undervalued assets and untapped potential. Heartland has strong fundamentals, solid loan portfolios, valuable real estate holdings, and established brand. But your stock has underperformed the regional banking index by 23% over the past 2 years. He slid a folder across the table. "This contains our analysis of Heartland's position and our proposals for improving performance." Bradford barely glanced at the folder. "We're always open to shareholder input, of course, but the banking business has faced industry-wide challenges. Our performance is in line with many peer institutions." "With respect, that's not accurate," James countered, opening his own copy of the report. "While Heartland's stock has declined 18% in the past year, your 3 closest competitors have seen increases averaging 7%. Bradford's jaw tightened slightly as James continued, methodically laying out the ways Heartland had fallen behind: outdated technology, declining customer satisfaction, failure to capture emerging market segments. Your mobile banking app ranks last among regional banks in user ratings," James pointed out. "Your small business loan originations have dropped 40% in 5 years, and your customer demographics skew significantly older than the regional average, suggesting difficulty attracting younger clients." Phillips, the CEO, flushed slightly. "We've been planning technology upgrades, and our customer base reflects our focus on established business relationships rather than chasing trends." "Respectfully," Elena interjected, "banking isn't about chasing trends. It's about serving customers how and where they want to be served. Today, that means digital-first options with human support when needed." Bradford cleared his throat again. "Well, we appreciate your thorough analysis. We'll certainly consider your suggestions. Is that all for today?" James exchanged glances with his team before responding. "Actually, no. There's one more matter to discuss." He paused, making sure he had the board's full attention. "Horizon Partners would like to make an offer to acquire Heartland Financial." The room fell silent. Bradford's face registered shock before shifting to disbelief. "Acquire? You want to buy the bank?" "Yes," James said simply. "We're prepared to offer 30% above the current market price." Phillips let out a short, dismissive laugh. "This is absurd. Heartland has been independent for over 100 years. We're not for sale, certainly not to a tech company." James kept his expression neutral, though he noted Phillips had stopped himself from saying something else. "Not to my technology company," he clarified. "This would be a private investment consortium, led by Horizon Partners, and 30% above market represents significant immediate value for all shareholders. The board would never approve such a sale," Bradford declared. That would be the board's prerogative, James acknowledged. But as the largest shareholder block with 15% of outstanding shares, we'd be obligated to ensure that any decision serves the interests of all shareholders. If the current leadership can't reverse the ongoing decline in value, we might need to explore other avenues. The implied threat of a proxy fight hung in the air. Bradford's face hardened. Is that why you've been quietly accumulating shares? To force a takeover?
We invested because we saw value where the market didn't, James replied.
And now we're offering a way for all shareholders to realize that value immediately. Our offer letter contains the full details, including our financing commitments and regulatory approval strategy. He slid another folder across the table. This one Bradford did pick up, opening it to scan the contents with growing discomfort. This is a serious offer, he admitted reluctantly. It is, James confirmed. And it comes with one key condition, a restructuring of the executive leadership team and board. Phillips slammed his hand on the table. This is outrageous. You're trying to push us out of our own bank. I'm trying to maximize value for shareholders, James corrected, including the significant share owned by current management and board members. You stand to benefit substantially from accepting our offer. Bradford raised a hand to silence Phillips. We'll need time to review this proposal with our advisors. Of course, James said. We're prepared to give you 1 week. After that, we'll need to consider other options, including taking our offer directly to shareholders. As the meeting ended and Heartland's board members filed out, looking shaken, James and his team remained seated. They'll fight this, David said once they were alone. Bradford's family has been associated with this bank for 3 generations. His identity is tied to it. They'll fight, James agreed. But they're also pragmatists. Once they verify our financing and realize we're serious, self-interest will kick in. The compensation packages we're offering for a smooth transition are generous. Elena wasn't so sure. Don't underestimate the power of pride. Bradford may choose to fight even if it costs him money. James nodded thoughtfully. Which is why we need to be prepared for all scenarios. Over the next week, James and his team worked tirelessly to prepare for Heartland's response. They finalized regulatory filings, solidified their financing, and developed contingency plans for various board reactions. When Bradford finally called, his tone was curt. The board has reviewed your proposal and found it inadequate. We believe our current strategy will deliver superior long-term value. We are not interested in selling the bank. James had expected this initial rejection. I understand your position. However, as significant shareholders, we remain concerned about the bank's direction. Perhaps we could meet again to discuss specific aspects of our proposal that you found problematic. Bradford hesitated before responding. I suppose that would be reasonable. My office tomorrow at 2? The next day's meeting revealed the cracks in Heartland's unified front. While Bradford and Phillips remained firmly opposed to the acquisition, 2 other board members seemed more receptive, asking detailed questions about Horizon's plans for the bank. Your technology modernization plans are intriguing, admitted Nancy Winters, a board member with a background in consulting. But the timeline seems aggressive. We've built in conservative estimates, James explained. And we've already identified the vendors and systems we'd implement. This isn't theoretical. We've done detailed planning. By the meeting's end, it was clear the board was divided. Bradford ended with a firm rejection of the offer. But James could see the uncertainty in some of their faces. That evening, James received an unexpected call from George Harper, one of Heartland's board members. I can't be seen talking to you officially, Harper said in a low voice. But you should know there's significant disagreement among the board. Some of us believe your offer deserves serious consideration, especially given the bank's recent performance. I appreciate the information, James replied carefully. Bradford and Phillips are reaching out to other potential buyers looking for a white knight, Harper continued. But your offer is compelling. If you could address a few key concerns, you might sway enough votes. What concerns specifically? Job security for existing staff, continuity for longtime customers, and frankly, some reassurance about your intentions. There's suspicion that you have some personal vendetta against the bank. James thought of his treatment in the bank lobby months earlier. This is purely a business decision, he said, and we have no plans for mass layoffs. Our focus would be on retraining existing staff and changing the culture, not replacing people. Put that in writing, Harper advised, and maybe raise your offer a few points. It might be enough to tip the balance. After the call, James consulted with his team and decided to follow Harper's advice. They revised their offer, adding specific commitments about staff retention and customer service continuity, and increased the price by 3 percentage points. 2 days later, they received word that the board had called an emergency meeting to reconsider the offer. Institutional shareholders, learning of the premium being offered, were pressuring the board to engage seriously with Horizon Partners. Bradford called James himself, his voice strained. "We're willing to discuss terms, but we want certain guarantees in writing." "We're happy to provide those," James replied. "When would you like to meet?" The negotiations that followed were intense and detailed. Bradford fought for golden parachutes for the executive team. Phillips argued for keeping the Heartland name and brand. Other board members focused on their own priorities: branch locations in their communities, support for long-standing charitable initiatives, protections for long-time employees. James and his team conceded where they could while holding firm on the essentials: control over the leadership team, freedom to implement technological changes, and the ability to reshape the bank's culture. After 3 weeks of negotiations, they reached an agreement. Heartland Financial would be acquired by Horizon Partners at 33% above the pre-offer stock price. Bradford and 3 other board members would retire with generous packages. 4 executives, including Phillips, would transition out over 6 months. The Heartland name and community commitments would remain. As James signed the final agreement, Bradford watched him with a mixture of resignation and curiosity. "I have to ask," the older man said quietly. "Why us? Of all the banks you could have targeted, why Heartland?" James looked him directly in the eye. "Because I saw potential others missed, and because sometimes the most valuable lesson is recognizing what you've overlooked." Bradford nodded slowly, not fully understanding but sensing there was more to the story than James was sharing. "Well," he said, extending his hand, "I hope you know what you're getting into. Banking isn't like other businesses." James shook his hand firmly. "I'm counting on it." As he left the building that would soon be his to transform, James felt not triumph but determination. The acquisition was just the beginning. The real work, reshaping an institution to better serve all members of the community, lay ahead, and he was more than ready for the challenge. 6 months after the acquisition, Heartland Financial's main branch buzzed with activity. The marble floors still gleamed, but the space had been transformed. Gone were the imposing teller counters that created distance between staff and customers. In their place stood modern open service areas where employees and clients could sit together to discuss financial needs. James walked through the lobby, nodding to staff members who greeted him by name. As the new owner and chairman, he made a point of visiting different branches regularly, getting to know the people who represented Heartland to the community. "Good morning, Mr. Wilson," called Diane from the welcome desk. Unlike the receptionist from his fateful visit a year earlier, Diane had been specially trained to greet every customer with the same level of respect and attention. "Morning. Diane, how's the new system working out?" "Much better now. That training session your team ran last week cleared up a lot of confusion. I actually understand what I'm doing now instead of just pressing buttons and hoping for the best." James smiled. The technology overhaul had been one of their first major initiatives, replacing outdated systems with intuitive, powerful tools that made banking easier for both customers and staff. But they hadn't just dropped new technology on employees. They'd invested heavily in training and support. "Glad to hear it. Is Kate available? I'd like to check in on the small business program." Diane nodded and made a quick call. Moments later, Kate Reynolds appeared from one of the glass-walled offices. As the newly appointed Director of Community Business Development, Kate had been tasked with rebuilding Heartland's relationships with local entrepreneurs. "James, perfect timing. I was just about to send you the first-month numbers for the new loan program." They walked together to a comfortable meeting area where Kate pulled up the data on a tablet. "We've processed 87 applications through the expedited program," she reported, swiping through charts and graphs. "Approval rate is 68%, which is 15 points higher than our historical average without any increase in risk factors." The expedited small business loan program had been one of James's first innovations, streamlining the application process and using more sophisticated analytics to evaluate business potential rather than relying solely on traditional credit metrics. And the demographic breakdown? James asked. Kate smiled, clearly pleased with this part of her report. 42% of approved loans went to minority-owned businesses, compared to just 11% in the year before acquisition. And first-time business loan recipients make up 35% of approvals. That's exactly what we wanted to see. James nodded. We're reaching entrepreneurs who were being overlooked before. As they continued discussing the program, James noticed a familiar face at one of the service desks, Thomas Blackwell, the bank manager who had dismissed him a year ago. Blackwell was now the head of a new department focused on customer experience, a position James had created specifically for him during the reorganization. Initially, James had considered letting Blackwell go. The temptation to replace the man who had treated him so dismissively had been strong. But ultimately, he'd made a different choice, and excuse me a moment. Kate, James said, walking over to Blackwell's desk. The manager looked up, his expression shifting from professional courtesy to recognition and a flash of discomfort. Even after 6 months, these encounters weren't entirely comfortable for either of them. Mr. Wilson, Blackwell said, standing to shake James's hand. I was just reviewing the customer feedback from the downtown branches. Satisfaction scores are up 12 points from last quarter. That's good progress, James acknowledged. What are customers saying about the changes? Blackwell pulled up the survey results. They like the shorter wait times and the more personal approach. The ability to bank through the app but still talk to a real person when needed is mentioned frequently, and the community businesses we've featured in the branches are getting positive attention. Each Heartland branch now showcased local businesses, particularly those that had received loans or other support from the bank. It was part of James's vision to make the bank a visible partner in community success, not just a place where money changed hands. Good. And how are the staff adjusting to the new approach? Blackwell hesitated briefly. There was resistance at first, as you know. Change is never easy, but seeing the positive customer responses has helped, and the incentive structure that rewards customer satisfaction rather than just sales numbers is making a difference. James nodded. The cultural transformation had been perhaps the most challenging aspect of the acquisition. Changing policies was straightforward. Changing mindsets took more time. What about the workshop series? He asked. The unconscious bias training? Blackwell's expression turned thoughtful. I was skeptical initially, to be honest. But it's been eye-opening, especially the sessions with business owners sharing their banking experiences. James had instituted a comprehensive training program that included having local entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds share their stories of seeking financing and support. Hearing firsthand accounts of the barriers they'd faced, sometimes at Heartland itself, had created powerful moments of recognition for many staff members. I'm glad to hear that, James said. Keep up the good work. As he turned to leave, Blackwell cleared his throat. Mr. Wilson, I've been meaning to say, what happened that day when you came in? I want to apologize, James paused. They'd never directly discussed the incident that had set this entire chain of events in motion. I didn't recognize you, Blackwell continued. Or rather, I didn't allow myself to see who you really were. I made assumptions based on, well, not on anything that should have mattered. Thank you for saying that, James replied simply. But what matters now is making sure no customer ever has that experience again. Blackwell nodded firmly. That's what I'm committed to ensuring. Later that afternoon, James met with his executive leadership team in the boardroom that had once been Bradford's domain. The stuffy oil paintings of former bank presidents had been replaced with vibrant artwork from local artists. The room itself had been redesigned to feel less hierarchical, with a round table replacing the imposing rectangular one. Quarter-end results are in, announced David, who had left his CFO position at RiseTech to join James at Heartland. Net income is up 8% compared to the same quarter last year. Customer acquisition is up 22%, with particularly strong growth in the under 40 demographic. Around the table, heads nodded approvingly. The leadership team James had assembled represented a mix of banking veterans and technology innovators, bringing diverse perspectives to the institution's challenges. The mobile app usage statistics are impressive, added Lily, who now served as Heartland's chief technology officer. 73% of customers have downloaded the app, and active users are growing at 15% month over month. What about the Community Development Fund? James asked, turning to Elena, who had become Heartland's president. We've committed $4 million in financing to projects in underserved neighborhoods, she reported. The Small Business Incubator program has 28 participants in its first cohort, with a waiting list for the next round. The Community Development Fund had been a personal priority for James, dedicating a percentage of profits to revitalizing neighborhoods that had historically been neglected by financial institutions. It wasn't charity, it was investment in untapped potential. As the meeting continued, James felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond financial metrics. In just 6 months, they'd begun transforming not just a bank, but the relationship between a financial institution and the community it served. After the meeting, James took the elevator to the ground floor, deciding to walk the few blocks to his next appointment rather than taking a car. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast a golden light over the city streets. He passed small businesses that now displayed proudly financed by Heartland signs in their windows. A cafe run by a young immigrant family, a tech repair shop owned by a veteran, a boutique started by 2 friends from the neighborhood where James had grown up. Each represented a dream that might have been deferred or denied under the old Heartland regime. Now they were part of a new story, one about recognizing potential and creating opportunity regardless of what someone looked like or where they came from. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. The Regional Business Association had just announced Heartland as a finalist for their annual Innovation Award, the first time a bank had ever been considered. The transformation was gaining recognition beyond their customer base. James smiled as he pocketed his phone and continued his walk. The journey that had begun with a moment of disrespect had evolved into something far more significant than personal vindication. It had become a mission to create the kind of institution he wished had existed when he was starting out, one that saw people for their potential rather than their appearance. As he approached the community center where he was scheduled to speak to a group of aspiring entrepreneurs, James reflected on how a single negative interaction had ultimately led to positive change for an entire community. Sometimes the most powerful response to being underestimated wasn't anger or resentment, but using that moment as fuel to create something better. The old Heartland had failed to recognize James Wilson when he walked through their doors. The new Heartland would make sure they never failed to see the potential in any customer again. And that, James thought as he greeted the eager young faces waiting to hear his story, was a transformation worth every bit of the effort it had taken.